The shark's head was out of water and his back was coming out, and the old man could hear the noise of skin and flesh ripping on the big fish when he rammed the harpoon down onto the shark's head at a spot where the line between his eyes intersected with the line that ran straight back from his nose. There were no such lines. There was only the heavy, sharp blue head and the big eyes and the clicking, thrusting, all-swallowing jaws. But that was the location of the brain, and the old man hit it. He hit it with his blood-mushed hands, driving a good harpoon with all his strength. He hit it without hope, but with resolution and complete malignancy. That is from The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway. I've heard this book was really good. I saw it on a list of quick reads that are, like quick classic reads. It's like 81 pages, I believe. So I thought, I want to get that because I've heard the name Ernest Hemingway so many times that he's like one of the greats of authors. And so I thought I'd give it a shot and see what it's all about. This isn't the kind of book that I feel the need to like analyze too much. It kind of is, it seems to be the kind of story that is just, it's just a good story to have with you and to think about over the months and years after you read it, and just let it live in your head, because it's just this simple, timeless story of a fisherman trying to catch a fish. From here on out, we'll go into spoilers. So this is about an old guy in Cuba about 1953 when the book was written. He's a fisherman. He is just completely poor. He sleeps in a shack with palm leaves as his carpet, and he has basically no possessions except his fishing boat. And then he has newspapers of baseball that he reads, and he sleeps with his pants and his newspaper as the pillow. And then he has a little blanket. So this guy lives a really simple life in Cuba in the 50s. And he's just a really good fisherman. He's really good at what he does. He's on a big streak of bad luck. And he had a boy who helped him fish. He would go with him fishing for a while, but they went 80-something days without catching any fish. And I think the boy's family kind of pressured him to go with another fisherman and work with him. So the boy and this old man are still friends. They still spend time together every morning, but the boy is working with a different fisherman. This old man is on a bad luck streak, and this book, the bulk of the story is this one fishing trip he goes on a tiny little skiff, tiny little sailboat for fishing. He goes further out to sea than he plans, and he ends up finding the biggest fish he's ever seen. It's a marlin, it's a swordfish. In the end, it says it's 18 feet long, so it's longer than the boat he's in. And it's a really interesting story. I learned a lot about fishing reading it. It makes me want to learn how to fish. It makes me want to go out and learn how to sail and learn more about the ocean. It's very kind of stream of consciousness a lot of the times, in this character's head. The old man, Santiago. It's very in his head a lot of the time. He's narrating all his knowledge of the sea. He knows the ocean really well. He knows the birds and the fish. It's just cool to hear all his knowledge of the sea and the fish and the birds. Ernest Hemingway fished a lot, and there's pictures of him fishing in this edition of the book. He fished in the same way that Santiago does in this book, with a small boat. I'm sure Ernest Hemingway had fished in different ways sometimes, but I actually learned that Ernest Hemingway had this same basic experience as the character in this book. He went out and got a marlin, and sharks ended up eating most of the fish. So to move on with the story, Santiago ends up fighting this fish for 3 whole days, holding on to the fishing line till his hands are bleeding. He has barely any food, and he's eating fish that he catches along the way to sustain him. He barely sleeps for these 3 days, and he's pushed to his absolute limit, and using all of his knowledge as a fisherman to survive these 3 days and just hold on to the line, literally just holding on. And he's fighting this swordfish who's bit on the hook. And the swordfish is pulling his boat kind of slowly for this whole 3 days. And it's just pushed Santiago to his absolute limit. He eventually actually catches the fish. He catches the marlin and harpoons it, takes the harpoon out, and then I thought it was like happy ending. Okay, he's going to go home. But no, a shark comes and attacks his fish and tries to eat the swordfish that's attached to his boat. Santiago ends up killing that shark, but then there's blood in the water from the shark eating the swordfish, and then more sharks come. And then it's just Santiago fighting until the end. I thought he might die. I thought he was definitely going to die. I thought Santiago was going to be eaten by sharks. But he doesn't die. But he does like kind of fail. And I like how this story didn't have the like typical redemption arc where it's like, well, on the bright side, Ernest Hemingway tells a story that's more like the redemption is just in he did his best. He didn't give up. And that is enough for a noble ending to a story. Santiago, just from the very beginning to the very end, is just a true hoss. He's just the kind of guy who does not give up. He does his best. He knows what he's doing, and he applies all of his knowledge and skills. And I love how this book is only 80 pages, but it is so concentrated of just telling the story of endurance and resilience of this one guy who's had a whole lifetime of just doing this one thing, of just fishing. And he's built up all this knowledge and skills, and it's all put to the test in this 3-day span. And so in that sense, he passes the test because, he survives, and he found a big fish. The sharks eat all the meat off of the fish, and it's just the skeleton left. So it's kind of like bittersweet, you know? But like it says in this book, the really famous line from this book is that a man can be destroyed, but not defeated. And that's kind of the whole message or the whole theme of the book. I don't want to say there's a message to this book because it's I feel like it's deeper than that. You know, I don't want to extrapolate like one meaning from this book. This is the kind of thing that I'm definitely going to reread again soon. It's only 80 pages, so, you know, it's like a novella. It really is like, feels like a timeless story, and the character feels like just such a good character. It's just a flawless hero. He's humble and noble and resilient and funny. He seems like a fun guy to be around, like someone you'd want to, you know, just hang out with. There's some funny little bits I'll read here and some good bits. First I want to read this little excerpt from near the beginning. It talks about the sea. He always thought of the sea as la mar, which is what people call her in Spanish when they love her. Sometimes those who love her say bad things of her, but they are always said as though she were a woman. Some of the younger fishermen, those who had buoys as floats for their lines and had motorboats bought when the shark livers had brought much money, spoke of her as El Mar, which is masculine. They spoke of her as a contestant or a place or even an enemy. But the old man always thought of her as feminine and as something that gave or withheld great favors and if she did wild or wicked things, it was because she could not help them. The moon affects her as it does a woman, he thought. There's just, most of the story is just really matter of fact. I've never read Ernest Hemingway before, so this is all new to me, but this is what I've heard about him, and I see it in the book. He writes really matter of fact, to the point, just like this is what's happening. And it lets your mind kind of be open to wander and think about the meaning of things. He's not like going, it's very easy to follow. And that's why I think a lot of people say, part of why a lot of people say it's like a really masculine storyteller. He's a really masculine character, Ernest Hemingway. And he was also, out hunting lions and tigers and fish and stuff too. And he's an adventurer. And this character, Santiago, is an adventurer. So I like how a lot of the book is really straightforward, easy to follow. And then it'll go into these little, one paragraph like I just read, where it makes you think about something, on a more like philosophical, artsy level, and then he goes back to the straightforward stuff. This is inside Santiago's mind. He's thinking, it is better to be lucky, but I would rather be exact. Then when luck comes, you are ready. There's a bunch of little fishing tricks Santiago does. Like he says, I could just drift, he thought, and sleep and put a bite of line around my toe to wake me. So he's on this little fishing boat, just ties the fishing line around his toe, takes a nap. If he gets a bite, the fishing line wakes him up. I never thought of that before. That was cool. I like this part. He's talking about a fish he once hooked. He remembered the time he had hooked one of a pair of marlin. The male fish always let the female fish feed first, and the hooked fish, the female, made a wild, panic-stricken, despairing fight that soon exhausted her. And all the time the male had stayed with her, crossing the line and circling with her on the surface. He had stayed so close that the old man was afraid he would cut the line with his tail, which was sharp as a scythe, and almost of that size and shape. When the old man had gaffed her and clubbed her, holding the rapier bill with its sandpaper edge and clubbing her across the top of her head until her color turned to a color almost like the backing of mirrors, and then with the boy's aid hoisted her aboard, the male fish had stayed by the side of the boat. Then, while the old man was clearing the lines and preparing the harpoon, the male fish jumped high into the air beside the boat to see where the female was, and then went down deep, his lavender wings that were his pectoral fins spread wide and all his wide lavender stripes showing. He was beautiful, the old man remembered, and he had stayed. I think part of why Santiago is such a likable character is he talks to the ocean, he talks to the fish, talks to the sharks, he talks to his left hand as if it's like a person. This says, but his left hand had always been a traitor and would not do what he called on it to do, and he did not trust it. Near the end of the book, he's talking to the swordfish, at first like he's his enemy, he's going after the swordfish. After he catches it, he's talking to it like it's his friend. And there's even a part where he's like, I'm not even sure if the swordfish is pulling me to land or if I'm pulling the swordfish to land. Who's even leading the way here? And he's saying, like, take me wherever you want to go, fish. And it reminded me of, like, Castaway, like, with Wilson. He's talking to the volleyball. He's going a little kooky in the wilderness. But this has a more of a dimension of, like, natural, timeless questions, because this is a fish and it's the animal he's hunting. And a lot of the book, what I was thinking about was, I saw a documentary in like an art class in college where it was talking about cave paintings, and actually in G.K. Chesterton's The Everlasting Man, it talks about this as well. I did a video about that you can watch, and he touches on cave paintings in there, and the cavemen would paint the prey that they were hunting, and they would paint over and over again these like big elk. And to them, the theory is that maybe the elk was the most like divine thing they could imagine, like this beautiful creature that is the source of life for them, the cavemen. I was thinking about that while I was reading this. It's just kind of, ruminating on those ideas of like, this guy is hunting the fish, and in that sense, he's his enemy, but it's like he really respects the fish. And there's multiple times in this book where he says out loud to the fish, like, you're better than me, you're more noble than me, you're beautiful, like, I should be more like you, I'm sorry, like that kind of thing. It's just interesting things I don't want to, break down too much. It's just like, it's the kind of stuff that sticks in my mind for a long time. He says, "The fish is my friend too," he said aloud. "I have never seen or heard of such a fish, but I must kill him. I am glad we do not have to try to kill the stars." Imagine if each day a man must try to kill the moon, he thought. The moon runs away, but imagine if a man each day should have to try to kill the sun. We were born lucky, he thought. And I just relate to that kind of thing where, when you're out in a really extraneous circumstance, your mind starts to go to the far corners of possibility, and it's just so human, I guess. I just love the stream of consciousness of Santiago. It's just totally timeless. Like, that's not that part about the sun and the moon, and we're lucky we don't have to chase them down. We only have to chase down these animals. It's just like, that's something every human ever could relate to, if they have those crazy wandering thoughts. In this one part, Ernest Hemingway describes a shark as just a moving appetite. And I just think those little bits are just funny. It's those little, like, dry observations, just stating something as it really is in a funny way. Like, I always thought of sharks like that, like, or not always, but they're just mouths. It's just a mouth swimming around eating things. It just moves and eats, just a mouth moving around, a moving appetite. In this part, two sharks swim up, and Santiago says, "Hey!" he said aloud. There is no translation for this word, and perhaps it is just a noise, such as a man might make involuntarily, feeling the nail go through his hands and into the wood. There's just a bunch of little allusions in this book, very quick allusions to Christ. I don't know. It's really interesting how Hemingway just slips those in like every couple chapters. It makes me think. It's just, I like how Santiago, as he's stabbing the sharks, he's fighting them off. There's like 10 sharks he kills at least in this whole time. He's on this tiny little boat fighting off these sharks, and he's talking shit to them as he's killing them. As there's one part where he says, "Go on, Galano, slide down a mile deep. Go see your friend, or maybe it's your mother." He says the next shark that came was a single shovel nose. He came like a pig to the trough, if a pig had a mouth so wide that you could put your head in it. I'm learning that I like Ernest Hemingway. The way he writes is just like these little jokes that are very right in your face, simple. So that's The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway. I definitely recommend it. I don't even need to recommend it. It's one of those classics. You could read it in one sitting. It's like 81 pages. Really good book. Definitely going to reread it. Like and subscribe for more stuff like this. See you next time.